RTS. Senator Paxton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I wanted to drill down a little bit into slide 42, which is the slide on general education complaints.
Yes,
Just
ma'am.
make sure I understood it, a few things about it. So there are actually two parts to this slide, right?
That's correct.
The complaints and then actual investigations of misconduct. What's the difference between a complaint and what would, I guess, trigger an investigation?
That's a great question. Let me provide a slight clarification. We bucket our categories of complaints into, I think, 5 buckets. Special education complaints, educator misconduct matters, academic integrity complaints, allegations, general complaints. That might be it. I might be forgetting something. So general complaints are sort of a catch-all for any violation of the education code that is not specifically an educator complaint or one of the other complaints. So the graph on the left is the general complaints category. The graph on the right is the educator misconduct allegation.
Okay.
So that's why there's only 2,500 general complaints and there's like 12,500 educator misconduct allegations. These are sort of mutually exclusive buckets of complaints.
Okay. The discretionary closures are those things that are dismissed basically as a complaint?
Yeah, there are things that are dismissed as a complaint. Discretionary closures is things we never looked at in the first place. It's the lowest level of triage. We look at the allegation, and if there's an allegation of something related to student safety, it's never going to be discretionarily closed. But we get a lot of complaints. I remember a complaint I dealt with on the school board in Dallas was related to air conditioning. So discretionary closures are closures that just from a prosecutorial triage perspective, we simply ignore.
Okay. So you ignore them for a variety of reasons.
That's right.
So one would be it's outside the scope of your authority, maybe?
These are generally inside the scope of the authority. It's literally we just don't have enough resources to go after them. That's what.
So it could be you look at it and you could even say, I think this is a legitimate complaint, and we have the ability or we have the authority to look into this, but we're not.
Yeah, that's right. The best, I think, to wrap your arm around the sort of category of it, you think about TEA's role versus sort of school districts. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is something that the school district might want to fire you for or write you up for or transfer you to a different role for. But it's not something that needs to follow your SBEC record in Austin for all future employment. That's going to be the things like that's generally if they fall below a certain threshold, and we're like it's unlikely that this needs to be on your permanent record as a teacher in Austin. Those generally end up getting just discretionarily closed.
Okay.
Some of those if we had more resources, we probably would not discretionarily close. Because these are again never issues of student safety.
Okay, I can see though where as a parent who makes what they consider a legitimate complaint, and then it's discretionarily closed, it could be a very frustrating situation for a parent, don't you think? When it's like it's in the scope of the authority of TEA, and they're just not going to pursue it.
That is absolutely true. And that is a source of frustration that happens from time to time. Again, we're resource constrained. We go after what we can. There's only so many man hours, so there's some that we're just like. I understand that this might sound bad to you. From our perspective, it's not something that we're going to go after.
Mm-hmm. I'd be interested in maybe
yeah, I understand.
Categorizing those. There,
yep.
Let me find a word I can pronounce.
We will provide some follow-up for you to let you know what always results in an open investigation, what sometimes results in an open investigation, because these are actually adopted. The SBEC board has adopted a sort of a bifurcation, what they call priority 2. So it's only the things that are going to be in priority 2. So we'll follow up and get that information to you.
Okay. Well, because as I think about all of these things, right? I mean, we all have the same customer. It's the taxpayer, right? It's the parent. And so it does seem like it's a little bit insufficient to address a legitimate complaint in that kind of way. And that is the sort of thing that I get calls about in my office here at the Capitol and back in the district. From time to time, are about their parents that are frustrated. They've gone to their school board and haven't
Yep.
gotten a satisfactory answer, at least for them, given the thing that they're concerned about, and then they go to TEA, and but especially when it is something that it's within the scope of the authority of TEA to address. So I think that's something we need to look at.
We as part of our LAR, we have an exceptional item related to the strength of our investigative staff, and we do actually have an ask. This, as you can see, volume has increased pretty markedly. We have not had a material staffing level change in quite some time.
Well, I think the most frustrating situation in the world is feeling like you're not being listened to.
That's right.
And this kind of falls into that category. I also noticed that across the bottom of the chart on the left, on the complaints, these are not actually pulled out by school year, but by fiscal year, right?
You think if that was a school year, so that would be like the 18-19 school year, the 19-20 school year, the 2021 school year.
I think it says fiscal year.
It does say fiscal
Okay.
year. But I think you can think about those as school years.
Okay. Well, I think the thing that stood out to me, though, is that the big jump is between 2020 and 2021. I don't know what happened in 2020 that
I have some memory.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting because for all sorts of reasons, parents were much more hands-on starting in 2020.
That is
and
correct.
So that doesn't surprise me. Does it surprise you?
It does not surprise us either.
So much more hands-on, and I think also much more eyes on what was going on in their school that all of a sudden they were paying attention to. I remember when our 4 kids, when the third one went off to college, and our youngest one was the only one that was at home. The next big sister, the one that had just gone off to college, called me and she said, "Mom, you need to back off of Katie." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "It's like she feels like you're like watching every little thing she does." And it hit me that all her life she'd been kind of flying under the radar of the other 3 kids, and all of a sudden she was kind of under the microscope, right? But she was being watched in ways she wasn't accustomed to. But I think, you talked earlier about accountability and transparency and how critical they are for improvement of student outcomes. So I think, as I look at this, I see what I see is I look at parents started paying more attention to what was going on in the classroom. And if there are more parents watching, then obviously, just like if population goes up, you're going to have more complaints and more everything. But if you've got more parents watching, you are going to have more parents that are concerned about things.
Yeah, that's right.
So it is. When we look at the right side, the misconduct investigations, do you have categories
Yeah.
of misconduct?
We can actually break down this in a lot more detailed ways for you. So we'll prepare a kind of a more detailed follow-up of this information so that you can kind of digest it.
Just for our purposes here, in general, is there like a top category or maybe top 3?
There probably is, but I wouldn't know off the top of my head. Thankfully, the things that are deeply problematic are quite rare. As I mentioned, as of about July for this school year, 680 employees have been placed on that permanent do not hire registry. That you have to do something fairly significant for that to happen. So that's a small number out of this total. Of course, 680 out of 800,000 total employees, because you can be a teacher, which is about say 400,000 people, but you could be in any role. So
Well, I look forward to getting that.
We
more
do
detailed.
get one thing that this includes is anytime there is a criminal history hit with an employee, we ingest that as a matter to review, an investigation matter. So you can imagine someone is arrested for possession in a very small quantity of some unauthorized substance, but it happens in the summer in an environment completely away from children. That's a very different thing than an allegation that a teacher was using around students. Those are very, very different things, and so again, we have to sort of process those differently.
Well, they're different things, but
None of them
concerning.
Yeah, none of them are good.
Well, I would like to get more detail on what exactly constitutes misconduct, and maybe kind of the top categories and how many investigations in each of those.
Yep.
I think that's something. Is that information publicly available?
I'll figure out how to make some information available to you, and we'll share if it has to be privileged or if what information can be available public. I'm certain we can publicize stats in the aggregate publicly.
Well, thank you. And it's what teachers sign up for today is a lot, but parents are sending their most precious possession to school, and that's their child, and they deserve the best, and they deserve transparency. They deserve to be listened to, and I appreciate your willingness to get back to me on that.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm a dad of 4 before I'm Commissioner of Education, so
thank you.
Complete agreement.